Welcome to another session of Off the Record with Kyle Sells Biz, where every week we bring to you industry experts who are involved in the process of transferring business assets, selling and buying companies. Most of the guests tune into our podcast either because they have sold their business or plan on selling their business, or consider an acquisition and would like to get some insights and best practices on how to do so in a smooth and streamless process. We do have guests that join us that are like to get more information on the process so they can inform their clients. So be sure to follow myself, follow this podcast. We produce this every week, and we share some great content on how to buy and sell businesses and everything that involves the mergers and acquisitions process. Every week I have a special guest. This week I have Todd Sullivan. He's the CEO of ExitWise. We met a few weeks back in a previous podcast, and we've just hit it off right away and invite him to come on my podcast. Todd has a podcast of himself as well. I'm sure he's going to share a little bit about that and in the programming. And this podcast is called Off the Record for a reason. It's off the cuff, it's candid. This is live. We are streaming live on multiple channels. We're currently coming to you live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and here, yes, LinkedIn Live. I did mention that. So there's a comment section. If you have any questions or comments short the podcast, be sure to type it in, and we'll get to your comments later on in the show. We're going to run for about 40 to 45 minutes. This is an exciting topic. I'm just really excited to have our guest today. Todd is a seasoned tech entrepreneur. He has built and sold 4 companies. In the past 5 years, Todd has helped his fellow founders and business owners sell their businesses while educating them about the M&A process. To his latest venture, ExitWise, which I'm excited to learn a little bit more about. With ExitWise, Todd partners with trusted business advisors to help monetize their business owner networks by including their advisors on M&A teams for their referred clients who are considering an exit at ExitWise. Todd, over the last 20 years, he has definitely enjoyed his entrepreneurship journey, and we connected because the space that he's in, there's a lot of synergies. I want him to share his story, especially about how the businesses he's bought and sold and the clients that he's worked with over the past 20 years. So, Todd, it's a pleasure to have you on. Typically, how we kick this off, we like to hear a little bit about our guests' backgrounds. Maybe you could share a little bit about your professional journey and how you get started in M&A and founding ExitWise.
Absolutely. Kyle, thanks for having me. And like you said, we hit it off. We were put on a similar panel, right? We're on the same panel. And I looked around and I was like, hey, I want to know what this guy does. So, I called you up before the panel and we just started trading notes. And I feel like we have kind of a similar background in that we are here to literally help business owners go through what is an enormous transaction in their lives with very little education for them, right? They're great at building businesses, but selling it, it really is a mystery to most people. And I think, we're coming at it from a very similar place. So there was a kinship on that first call and just looking forward to building this relationship. So I'll give you a little bit on my background. Like you said, I've been a tech entrepreneur for 25 years and I've built and sold 4 companies. And I've done that with investment banks. I've done the exit side of it, right? I've done it with investment bank, an M&A advisor. I did 2 on my own. And really what I learned was I was making so many mistakes. And when I sold my last company in 2015, and by the way, the last 3 were backed by venture capital firms. And I say that because they're real kind of professional investors at the table. They are, on the board, and yet we're still making mistakes in M&A because when you look at that full entrepreneurial journey, that M&A experience, that exit really is the black box for most founders. If you haven't been through it before, you have no idea what you're going into. So when I sold my last company in 2015, I really said, all right, how do I just give back to my fellow founders? So I started investing in some and investing in like similar categories where I thought I could get founders to talk to each other and share the problems and to just help kind of build companies better. And it found it wasn't particularly scalable. I wasn't having impact. And I just said, all right, you know what? I got to focus really at the end game, that exit, because that's where founders need really the most help and where we can help the most people. So I partnered with a really good friend from business school who had also gone out and built $1 billion company with 3 other guys. And he really understood scale of businesses, and he ran M&A. So he was buying companies as part of their growth. So we really come at this from experience of founding companies, building companies, and then understanding the pitfalls of M&A. We founded ExitWise, and we think we've created, right, or at least unleashed this better way to M&A, where we're really putting the power back in the hands of our fellow founders and not in the hands of the buyers. And happy to talk about how that works. But you're doing something very, very similar, and so you and I are looking for ways to collaborate to help, frankly, help more founders.
It's and I really love your story because you have done it on your own. You have worked with investment bankers, you've worked with professionals, especially the ones that were backed by venture capital and so on. Every deal is different, right? I'm sure there's a lot of takeaways you've learned from each one of those transactions you've done, and you being that resource, that advisor, part of that M&A team for companies looking for their first acquisition or exit. It's the life lessons you've learned along the way is irreplaceable, right? So
Absolutely.
I want to
Absolutely.
get into some of the horror stories. You said some, every deal in my experience dies at least 7 times before it can be completed, right? So a lot of issues that come about in every deal. But the topic we're talking about today is assembling your M&A team, right? And you have some experience, myself as well. But let's talk about that, right? So what are some of the key steps in assembling a powerful M&A team?
Yeah, that's a really that's a great question, right? That is the core of what we do. And maybe I'll just step back for a second and say the company that we've started, ExitWise, it's really a platform for business owners who are interested in selling their businesses to first learn about M&A and get introduced to the top industry specialized, and that's really the key point, industry specialized M&A experts. And those are investment bankers, M&A attorneys, tax accountants, private wealth managers. We really surround every founder with what we call their M&A dream team. And that inevitably helps maximize an exit and reduce risk of a failure. And so you talk about, like the horror stories. What really starts, in our opinion, with choosing the wrong team to represent you. The wrong team fails 70% of the time, if not more, right? Those are the best stats we have. M&A is very, very, very difficult. So what we really lean into is we saw in the first kind of handful of transactions, call it first 10 transactions, we went around the world for every founder and interviewed the best investment bankers that very specifically in that founder's industry. And it wasn't only industry, get very, very defined around the size of the business. And what we'll end up finding is an investment banker or multiple investment bankers that have already sold your business before in the last 18 months. They're already talking with buyers. They're going to all of your trade shows. They have spent years and years and years in understanding how businesses are built and sold in that industry. So they can really put a unique spin on the value of your company. It isn't just a mathematical formula. And so when you have a representative that is taking you to market and presenting you to buyers that truly understands the value of your business, we see far greater outcomes, right? We have 0 failures at ExitWise in an industry that fails 70% of the time. So this M&A dream team, it works. Whether you use us to find that team and create that team, or you do it yourself, or you work with you, Kyle, this is absolutely the way to sell a business in the lower middle market. And when I say lower middle market, we're really talking about, call it $15 million of enterprise value up to $500 million of enterprise value. And that is the enterprise value is really that exit price that a founder would see, maybe with some structure around that. So do you want to talk about, building that M&A team? I didn't mean to avoid your question entirely.
No. So who is on the team, and what are some of the qualities a business owner should look for when they're pulling their team together? Like, if you want to talk about, the key players as on an M&A team,
Sure.
on a deal team.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we typically start with the investment banker. And I'll give one caveat to that. When a business owner comes to us and says, "I'm really interested in selling my business," we say, "Okay, why? What are you trying to achieve?" Because in many cases, they may have a financial outcome, or they had an illness or a death in the family, or a partner, right? There's something driving this. But if it's economics, what we like to do is suggest meeting with wealth managers, and those wealth managers will put a plan together of what you are going to do post selling your business. In many cases, you're going to continue to work with the business, but you want to understand this life-changing event, not just financially, but personally. You're no longer going to be the boss. You are going to be an employee. Or if you're taking all the cash off the table, then what are you doing with the rest of your life? And it's a really important moment, an important part of the team, because it aligns that number in your head and what you're going to do afterwards really aligns the rest of the team around the goals of your M&A transaction. So I'll give you an example. We had a woman, and she had a business looking to sell it, and she wanted to sell because she wanted a new house, put kids through college. There's all kind of economic goals. And when we laid that out for her, it really became, through wealth managers, by the way, we got multiple perspectives. What it really said to us is, on a post-tax basis, she really has to walk away with $15 million to do everything that she wants in her life. And she didn't own the majority of this company. At $13 million, her chances of achieving all these goals were really diminished. So now we know what she's going to say yes to, and we know what she's going to say no to. And then the next person on that team is the investment banker. And when the investment banker comes back and says, "Yes, I absolutely understand this industry. I've sold multiple companies just like you. Here are the top 5 buyers. And I have insight into 2 or 3 buyers who are going to fight over your business. And we will achieve more than that $15 million in your pocket post-tax." That is really, really critical to creating alignment. So you're not running down the field for 6 months and then running into a wall of failure. So yeah, your investment banker really comes next. They are the quarterback of the team. We use lots of sports analogies, as you know, Kyle.
Yeah, love sport analogies.
The next person on the team tends to be an accounting on the quality of earnings side for us. And what that really is digging into the actual financials of your business, and really understanding that what you're going to present to buyers, what your investment banker is going to present to buyers, is truth. And it's also going to, in this quality of earnings process, which is an accounting process, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks, and can cost anywhere from, call it $30,000 up to $70,000, but is very, very worth it, because you're also going to see the little red flags in your business that you may not have known about. And those red flags are really, really important to identify at the beginning, because it allows you to have a conversation with your investment banker and your M&A team to say, how are we going to address these when the buyers inevitably see it? So you come up with great answers. You maybe make adjustments to your business. It is a great way to get ready for this going to market. So once you have that kind of economic or accounting ammunition in your pocket, you're also looking at kind of the tax implications of an M&A transaction. So we bring tax accounting in, and that might point you in a direction of, I really want to sell the assets of my business rather than the equity of my business, because there are tax implications. You might say, I really want to roll or invest the equity of my business in another company and invest alongside the future success. And there are tax implications of that. So then you're going to run a process. The investment banker, again, is that quarterback. They're taking it to market. They're creating marketing materials. And at some point, you're going to start talking with real buyers, and you're going to want to engage an M&A attorney. And this is not the M&A attorney. This is not an attorney that you use for your, family problems, right? This is somebody that transacts.
Well, not personal injury or
nothing like that, right? And people love to go with the people that they trust, and the person that they've worked with their whole careers. And it is an enormous mistake. And we see deals run into real problems when there is a lack of experience, not only on the M&A team that we build or we're handed, but on the buyer's side too. So that M&A attorney is really, really critical. And then as deals evolve, there are experts that we can bring in at any time. Maybe there's a lawyer around government contract work, right? That is going to write a letter of why that government contract is so powerful and it adds to the team. There might be deal insurance. We'll bring in M&A insurance to a particular transaction. And then we sit on top really as, call it the coach of that team. And we make sure that the investment bankers, the M&A attorneys, the tax accountants, quality of earnings, wealth managers, they're all playing well together, right? So one isn't fighting one battle while another one's fighting another battle, that everybody's working together, and it keeps costs in control and it drives the timeline in your favor in an M&A transaction.
I mean, what you laid out there is key, right? A lot of business owners don't really understand all that's involved. We think of it as, I'm just going to sell my house, put it on the market, put a sign in front of my yard and just welcome folks in, right? So there's also an area of confidentiality. And, I like to use the house analogy as well. You talk about getting the landscaping done, getting getting all the housekeeping, everything cleaned up and so on, staging the house for sale. So the same thing, you want to stage your business as well. And you want to bring in these experts. You mentioned the investment banker, right? So the investment banker is going to do the initial assessment, understand the business. They must understand the market as well. And having someone, when we talk about, picking the right investment banker, they having some experience, whether it be logistics, have sold or know the market, have sold other logistics company or HVAC companies, whatever the case may be. The wealth manager is a key one, in my opinion, because as a business owner, you want to make sure you have some sort of retirement plan in place. And at some point, it's going to be a liquidity effect. You're going to have some proceeds from that sale that you're going to want to invest. But the key to it is, maintain that lifestyle post-sale, right? So a lot of reasons deals don't get done because it's just a fear of the unknown. I sell my business and now, okay, so am I going to be able to maintain my lifestyle? What about my legacy? Who's going to buy the business? Are they going to maintain what I've built and all the relationships that I've had? I don't want my name tarnished and so on. I have a reputation and whatnot. But having that wealth manager come in and doing some calculations and determining, okay, well, what you're going to need from this sale to sustain your retirement and fulfill your retirement plan. The quality of earnings, it's key. And having some independent company, verify and run those numbers. A buyer is going to pretty much go through your closet, right?
Yeah.
Right. You're going to get naked at some point, right? So you want to make sure that all your numbers is up to par and correct and validated, and understanding what your tax implications are. So all those are good key points. And the same thing before we take on a client, we want to know who the professionals are. A lot of business owners have maintained relationships with their CPA sometimes when they started their business, and you want to assess to see if maybe there's any gaps, right? You can you mentioned about bringing in some industry experts in certain areas. There may be some pending lawsuits, there may be some issues with government contracts and whatnot that need to be addressed. So good points all around. What are some challenges you've seen over the years in forming a M&A team, and some things that business owners should be aware of?
Yes. This is the core of our offer, which is the biggest problem that we see is when a business owner starts to think about an exit, whether they have inbound interest, which means, a buyer has called you and you want to take that call, or you're saying, you know what, I would really like to retire in the next 3 years, or I would like to stop doing what I'm doing and go do something else, right? And I love to riff on that because that's what we're seeing a lot of, is these entrepreneurs that see entrepreneurship as a career path, and will do it multiple times. So the biggest problem that we see is that you call up your attorney, or you call up your accountant, or you call up your wealth manager and say, look, I'm thinking about selling my business. Who does that? And your wealth manager, your attorney, your accountant will introduce you to a local investment bank that bought them the best cup of coffee. And they may be very, very nice people, but if they tell you, yeah, we're industry agnostic, we run a proprietary process, we're really good at what we do, if they have not sold your business already and have a real specialty in your industry, you're going to run a very generic process. You're really going to lose confidentiality around this, because that is the shotgun approach. And that is the approach that fails 70% of the time. And so to me, uh, hiring on an industry agnostic investment bank is to run your process is the biggest mistake that you can make. This is highly specialized, and we equate it to having surgery, right? If you have a brain surgery, you don't go to your family doctor and say, hey, will you do this for me? You interview everyone, and this is a life or death decision. So you are getting the best, absolute best neurosurgeon to do a brain surgery. So, and we don't expect people to fully understand this. You're great at building a business. You've done this your whole career. You are the expert in that. But M&A is its own thing. And you really, really, really have this amazing opportunity to rely on the best professionals in the world. They're just really hard to find. I think that that is the biggest mistake. It's right up front, and it leads to huge failure.
Yeah. So yeah, you made a good point. One other thing I may add to that, you mentioned the CPA, and this kind of goes across the board in multiple professionals. Sometimes, they want to typically lose a client.
Yeah.
And something what I've seen too as well with certain companies, things has not been fully up to par. And now it's time to clean house and clean the business and bring it to market.
Yep.
Certain things will be disclosed and discovered in the process. And sometimes these professionals may not want those items to be disclosed, because then they could potentially be responsible or being not in compliance, so to speak. So I've seen some of that in my history in doing this, but the CPA is a key component, and getting that CPA on the same page. In some cases, some CPAs, not all, if they're not operating in the best interest of the client, can think, well, I may be losing a client, so to speak, and may not cooperate fully. And I've seen it in reverse, where the CPA actually wants to help the client, but the seller, maybe watching the bill, so to speak, and want to minimize communications with the CPA. So part of putting the deal team together is essentially, setting expectations. Hey, first thing, what we do, we want to figure out what the key motivation is on the exit. Like, why are you selling? What's the plan? What's your where do you see yourself 5 and 10 years from now? You're going to be involved in charity. You're going to be doing philanthropy. You're going to be hanging out with your grandkids. You just moved to Arizona. You're going to be in your boat. What's the game plan? And once you have those motivations and that why in check, why you're doing it, everything else starts falling in place. So essentially communicating that down to the team. Hey, we need to get this done because I have cancer, or I have an illness that I have to address. Like, my health is important, my well-being is important, and I have a legacy, and I have a family I want to be there for. And just communicating to the team, hey, we need to get this done. Figure this out, as opposed to sometimes the professionals driving the bus, so to speak, and dictating back to the seller. So some of these sellers have to kind of get control of. Sometimes what I've seen, sometimes another challenge I've seen is sometimes owners are intimidated sometimes by attorneys, right? But when I say you are the owner, you are the CEO, you have to take their advice, but still it comes, the buck essentially stops at you, and they have to figure it out to make this work. And if it doesn't work, then we have to move on to a different alternative. So there's always these internal battles. That's why assembling a team and then making sure everyone is on the same page and rowing in the right direction. And then there's transfer of communication between everyone in the team, right? So we make sure that it can be a smooth transition.
Kyle, I think it's a great point, right? When you talk about things that can ruin M&A transactions, I might put, who's on your team first. And then I might put the financials of the business are often very cloudy, and the founders don't know exactly how to present financials. And that can get cleaned up in Q of E and good accounting. But that is an enormous pitfall when you present something and there's mistakes. and buyers see that, you are at an enormous disadvantage of getting something done and certainly getting what you want. And then the third really is that cooperation that you're talking about. And I would say that if there's cooperation with your team internally, and when do you tell this team that you're going through this transaction? And what I would advise people is the person that you really want in, aside from your partner, right? If it's a real partner and they have a stake in making this decision, they certainly have to know. But your CFO or your controller, somebody that is handling the financials, because getting that person on board is really, really important to having the right information shared at the right time without you scrambling and wasting a bunch of time and taking your eye off of the business. One problem that we often see is if you have external investors, and I think this goes into your point with accountants and attorneys are like, oh, I'm going to lose my client, I better, bill hours. That unfortunately is real, right? It's everybody has self-interest. Excuse me. When it comes to the investors, we often see an investor saying, no, I don't want to sell today. I want to invest more money. This is the $1 billion opportunity. Why are we selling for, 100 million today when we can be $1 billion company? And the owners or really the founders of that business, their return on investment, their ROI may be far stronger today. They may own much more equity, and they want to take their chips off the table and doing it now rather than taking on more money and trying to build for another 5 years and leap over even bigger hurdles. It's enormously risky. And so we see that there is often a conflict with the investors' priorities and a founder's priorities. And so what I love is when we build M&A teams, I am very much interacting on the investor side. I mean, it did it yesterday, the day before. It's constantly trying to keep alignment and not disrupting the goals of a founder, right? We love every decision we make comes from the shoes of the founder because we have been in those shoes and we know all the little subtle obstacles that you're facing, building your business, but then going to sell it. So really good points around cooperation.
And how do you manage the team and manage those collaborations? Does that come from you directly, or do you coach the seller? Like that messaging, does that comes from the seller to the team, or does that come from you to the team, or that goes, or the investment banker to the team? Which channels do you use to get the game plan going?
Yeah, you said it. Every deal is different, but we say that the investment banker is the quarterback. We're bringing elite talent right to the table. So, I equate it to kind of professional sports. I was a hockey player, so I'll give you the hockey analogy, and congrats to the Vegas Knights who won the Stanley Cup last night. We can put for a founder, I can put Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, Patrick Roy in net, and bring Gretzky out of retirement and put them on the ice to win the Stanley Cup for you. You are going to pay those people a success fee, and it's going to be a substantial success fee, but they're winning you the Stanley Cup. Somebody, and they don't have to, right? You could put them all on the ice at the same time, and they're all incredible athletes. They're specialists, and they're going to be successful. But with a coach, right? Somebody that's saying, hey, maybe, think about it this way. What if you did this and someone else did this? You can create better performance as the coach. Now, I don't want to flatter ourselves and say that, hey, we're coaching every team, because these are really elite players. And we tell them, you guys run the game, but when you need us, call us in. And that often looks like, the best way to describe it is founders, business owners, there's so much emotion tied up in your business, right? So there's emotional decisions that you are making. And yes, it's certainly financial, but emotion really takes over. Your bankers, your buyers, they are all thinking financial. They are transactional people. And so translating emotion to finance is essentially what we do in every conversation. And often, right, I will tell a banker will say, hey, why aren't they calling me with that information? Why is the seller calling you? And I will say, hey, look, do you have a set of kid gloves in the garage? Go put them on, right? You're using too many acronyms. You're forcing agenda that is not aligned with what the founders' real goals are. You need to understand what we are trying
Yep.
to achieve. It is more than a number and selling to the biggest private equity firm you can. And I think that it's not to say that we school these bankers, because they are elite. We have 300 elite investment bankers around the world. So I can't tell them how to run their game, but I can tell them and share with them, how do you relate to founders, right? Because we know that game very well. And then on the flip side, we can tell founders, okay, look, I understand there's tons of emotion around here, but a decision needs to be made. And this is how you're going to make it. This is how you're going to benefit the most. I want you to say these 3 things. And I never want you to say that again. Right. And they trust us in that because we've been through it so many times, and the track record really speaks for itself. So we think we play an important part throughout that process of coach of a really, really an elite team, and making sure that the founders are getting exactly what they want.
You said a key thing there, trust and
Yeah.
giving advice and coaching, and that's just all about those relationships, because connecting the emotional piece to the transaction, sometimes they just don't equate, because the transaction team's like, hey, I just got you the biggest offer that you could ever get, right? It's like, I'm getting you 20, 100 million for your company. It's like, why are you not taking the deal? But in the emotional side, there's other things that's happening inside the founders or the CEO's head, like, what's going to happen? My employees are going to be worried. It's also this social governance thing as well. Like, are you selling out just to cash out, or are you finding a buyer that's a right fit for your culture, for your core values, for your local community, and so on? So sometimes the emotion and the transaction don't mix. But in my experience, I'm sure you've shared similar today as well, the emotions is what drives the transaction, right? And you have to really figure out, okay, well, what's the underlying reason here, or what's the cause that the symptoms that we can treat, right? We need to figure that out first, essentially, and then everything else falls into play. Most companies, they support the family, right? I should say all, right? The owner is doing this to support their family, support their loved ones. Some larger companies at a stage where they're doing bigger things to support community and support other areas that don't have the support in certain areas. So you have to kind of figure out all that stake, and that investment banker have to understand all that's in play. So it's a good point you're making. I can't believe it's like 9:40 already. Time is so high.
This is like our first conversation, right? We're hitting on so many cylinders. Like
I know.
we know we can be really helpful to each other, right?
Yeah, it's funny because it's like, I'm so glad that we met, because there are so much synergies in what you're doing and have done, and what we have done, and what we are currently doing. My passion is to help business owners be successful in a transaction, whether acquisition or exit, right? Many business owners are in a bubble. They're in a comfort zone. They've either never bought a business before or never sold their business, and don't know the dynamics of the transaction.
Yep.
9 out of 10 of my clients are not ready for an acquisition or exit. We do both in our company. They're not ready. They don't have the right team, the deal team we are talking about, don't have resources. They haven't educated themselves in the process. So when I started M&A Network, I built a company to 40 advisors that help businesses do just that. And then we met, and you have something similar. In your case, you're quarterbacking the process, quarterbacking the deal team, and putting the pieces in play. We have more of a membership type platform, but there are definitely some ways for us to learn. And I like what you're doing, because I think there's a percentage that says 20% of business, 80% of businesses never sell. So let's think about that. What happens to the economy when a business doesn't sell? There's a loss of jobs, right? There's no taxes going to that community. Those services that were being provided at that local hardware store, right? Now everyone's going to go to Lowe's and Home Depot, right? So we want to make sure we're going to maintain that wealth, and we're going to transfer that wealth either to a family member, to an employee, or to a third party. So the importance of mergers and acquisitions to the economy is huge. And you have individuals that may have worked in companies or be in the corporate world that are very smart and want to build an asset. We just saw what happened in the last pandemic where people got laid off, right? So now you can control your own destiny by owning a business, but where do you go? Where do you find help? How do you go about the process? So you have both parties and there's this gap. The seller has a lot going on. Hey, I've built up this great business and I don't just want to give it away. I have to find the right person. And then the buyer, they're looking at the cost of capital, trying to find the right business, don't really believe the numbers, don't believe, a lot of stuff. So you have this big gap and just trying to get both parties together. That's why the importance of having a deal team on both sides, professionals for the buyers, professionals for the sellers, is key to educate them on the process. And you start off the talk today with saying that having someone that's been there, done it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Client calls me up today, like, what are the multiples and logistics? What's happened? Who the major players are? You want to be able to have that information, at least have some insight into the industry. So I'm trying to summarize what we shared here, but I did want to go back to one thing, Todd. Do you have any war stories? You have sold, you've been through transactions yourself. You have a war story you want to share from one of your personal deals or from one of the deals that's part of your exit wise you want to share that may be helpful for everyone that's listening?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, they were all four were difficult in their own right. And I will get to one story, but I want to touch on one thing if I can remember. When you touch about emotion, right, managing that emotion for a founder, that emotion kind of goes up and down because this is a 6, 7, 8, 9-month process. And what I would just encourage founders is it gets very emotional at the end. Am I getting the best deal? Is this the right structure? And we see founders try to fight for pennies. And then they start looking at their team as, oh, you just want to get a deal done. You don't want the best possible deal. And I think that you've been through this journey with this team, and you really have to trust that team when they say this is the right deal, because buyers walk away. Time absolutely kills deals. So really try to remember when you're in that kind of 9th inning of a transaction, that time can kill your deal. Don't let emotion kind of take over. The other point I wanted to say is that you have tons of experience in selling businesses that are contractors or retailers or main street businesses, and helping those founders really kind of the backbone of the American economy. And so for us, our model doesn't work quite as well there because we're bringing kind of elite, and sorry for the noise in the background, these elite bankers from all over the world. Like, we're doing deals with bankers in London, Greece, Germany, Israel, Toronto, all across the United States. And the fees force us to do transactions that are above $15 million. That's like the minimum that we can do. And we tend to focus a little bit more, in the technology space. So I know we have 3 sales coming up right now in e-commerce, healthcare IT, real estate technology. There's another e-commerce, right? So as much as we love helping kind of the light industrial, we've certainly done manufacturing and aerospace and apparel and home. What I think is great synergy here is the founders that come to us asking for help, more Main Street retail. Now I have somebody I can go to, right? That really, really understands the process. And so we're trying to, how do we scale and help more founders? And that's why I think this partnership is so interesting. I'm sorry that was long-winded, but I think the horror story, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a horror story, the first business that I sold, we built some technology, and instead of going to market with our own company, we licensed that technology to one of the largest businesses or companies in that particular industry. Is called the Amer Group, a big sports brand conglomerate. And we were licensing technology, and they got to the point where, hey, this is too lucrative for them. We would just want to buy the company. And so we said, yeah, we're happy to have that conversation. We brought in an investment banker, and it was just somebody that was local to us, right? That was the mistake. They were introduced by a family member. Oh, you should use my buddy. So we did that. And in the end, we sold it and we were happy. We had a nice outcome, kind of fun story to tell. And really importantly for founders, we put a win on the board. I say we, my brother and I, we put a win on the board, which made building the next company much easier. Now, in hindsight, what we saw is that division of the Amerigroup ended up divesting the whole division. So they were in a major M&A transaction themselves. And our technology, our licensing agreement was holding up that sale. And so we're talking about, a few $1 million sale, right? Under $10 million sale for us was holding up, a $700 million sale for them. And think of the power that you would have in negotiation if you knew that. And our
Right.
banker had no idea because they didn't come from the industry. Now we have, I can think of two in our network that are sports product technology investment bankers. And if I call them, they know what everybody is doing. And so they know those leverage points. And I can tell you, we have transactions where we bring that leverage point in and, we turned a transaction from a $10 million offer to a $100 million outcome because of that leverage. So I would say it's not that we failed in a transaction. It's not that we didn't do well financially and couldn't build on that as part of an entrepreneurial career. But boy, if you had that inside knowledge, we would have really been in the driver's seat where we felt we were more reactive to, inbound offers, the inbound offer coming from that acquirer. So hopefully that explained it well. There are tons of little stories where we've learned along the way, and hopefully today that's what we're sharing is that education and how founders can get the upper hand in M&A now.
Yeah, and I love your story because actually when you share your story, we had a similar situation in a deal we were working on. That's why I always go back. You have to really know the why. As a seller, understand your why you're selling. And also as a buyer as well, know your why. And then both parties as well. Like when I coach my parties that are having that first management meeting, like forget the numbers. Don't talk about transaction, don't talk about business. Keep it more professional / personal, right? Getting to know them, as far as background and knowledge, and see what motivates them and why does they want to, buy the company in the first place, or why they want to sell the company. It's getting that personal connection. And you were sharing a story there. We were selling a refrigeration company, and the private equity group that was buying the business, we found out that they were actually needed this acquisition because there was packaging in this part of roll up for a sale. And this sale was actually holding up another transaction. And we went from 4 to 7 as far as our multiples go, because just having that knowledge. But you will know that sometimes private equity groups, they slip sometimes when they're sharing stuff. But that's why having those conversations before we share any information with buyers, we want to understand what their pain points are, and we make note of that. So when it comes like 6 months later, 5 months later, when it's time in due diligence or your time working that deal, like kind of reference back to those conversations. So
Absolutely.
It's important. Hey, Todd, you have any? I know you have your podcast. Do you have any events coming up you want to share where folks? And also, if you want to share how folks can get a hold of you through ExitWise, it would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for that opportunity. Certainly, we have a podcast called Cashing Out, where we interview founders that have been through the M&A process, and they get to share their advice, right? Here are the pitfalls. This is what I went through. This is what I would recommend. And it's anything from financial to personal. We love those stories. For me, it's just, I consider it just a real a privilege to be able to help entrepreneurs through their entrepreneurial journey. We're really helping with that end of the entrepreneurial journey. You can reach us at exitwise.com, and hopefully, you can learn something from our educational videos and blogs, and certainly the podcast. You can figure out the valuation of your company there. And it gives you kind of a wide range, but it's the start of a conversation. Every founder really needs to know, how much is my company worth? So please check out our valuation calculator on our website. And then if you want to dig in deeper, we literally can reach out to the best investment bankers in the world that sell your company every day and give you a really tighter range when we know more about that business. And you can reach me. Email is todd@exitwise.com. And we love having conversations, whether we can be helpful to you just educational wise, or help you, pick the right team. we're here to help. And again, it's a privilege to help other entrepreneurs.
It definitely is a privilege, and I want to really commend you on your journey and what you have done, and it's taken that knowledge that you've accumulated along over the years and sharing that with your network and your global network of founders and advisors, investment bankers, because it's needed. Knowledge is key, and I appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing. As far as upcoming programming, we do have on the M&A Network platform, we have our next roundtable is going to be next Tuesday. And we're going to be talking about metrics and trends for decision making, talking about the 5 key attributes for successful companies, understanding your cost drivers, being aware of your market, and how to measure your profitability. That's going to be June 20th. We will share a link with that in the comments if you guys want to join. One of our members, Ezra Firewalker, is going to be leading that discussion. That's on June 20th. And our next podcast is going to be next Wednesday. I don't know if you're familiar with EOS, Todd,
Sure.
but we have been through the EOS process ourselves, and I'm going to have my implementer that I've worked with over the past 2 years. We have since graduated from the program.
Good for you.
But he's going to be talking about the topic for next week's podcast is going to be sealing the deal, how EOS implementation ensures a profitable sale. And I've had Mitchell York on before with some very successful entrepreneurs that have sold their company and have implemented EOS, and that's been very instrumental in helping them exit. And it doesn't always have to be EOS. You just have to have a process in your business, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have good documentation. You have to have goals. You have to track everything, have a scorecard. So in this case, EOS is one of my preferred methodologies, but there are many of them. So, but Mitchell's going to join us next week. And then we do have our rooftop social that's going to be in Manhattan for those of you that are local. We're going to have a bunch of folks that are involved in mergers and acquisitions, private equity groups, investment bankers, attorneys, CPAs, advisors, just hanging out, talking about deals, talking about what's happening and trends. So if you're in the New York area and want to join us, that's going to be on June 27th. That's all she wrote, folks. Todd, is great. It's great having you. And I know we're going to have a lot more follow-up discussions and ways we can work more closely together. And just want to thank you for your time and thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely, Kyle. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.
Bye-bye.